At this point, we're going to create a center page. First of all, we start by declaring the document type. Our document type is a HTML. So we open the HTML, we open the head, we give it a meta name, we open the style. So the style is where we want to declare all that we wanted to happen within the text area. I'm just going to highlight the style tag for you to see. We open it from the top and we close it here. So within the style tag, we do all our styling. How we want the text to appear, what color we want to give it. We do everything within the style tag so that the text now inherits or reflects what the style determines. So the style is the brain behind what happened in the body. This is everything that happens in the body, but it's been determined by what the style demands. So let's come back to the style. So within the style, we used a few selectors to declare what we want to happen in the body. For instance, we called this selector body, and within that body selector, we declared our background here. And for our background, we gave it these color values: RGB 184, 110, and 110. We had another selector called dot content. Within dot content, we declared our max width, our margin, our background, and padding. For the max width, we gave it 800 pixels. For our margin, we gave it auto. For our background, we gave it these color values. And finally, for our padding, we gave it 70 pixels. Okay, let's jump back to the HTML web page. If I'm to refresh the page, 70 pixels gives us this appearance. Okay, I'm going to change that 70 pixels back to say 20 or 90, and we can see the difference. Let's go back to the code. So from 70, first of all, let's go to 20. So we have 20 pixels. I'm saving the document and we're jumping back to the HTML page. So with 20 pixels padding, this is what we have. Let's try 90 pixels padding. So I'm saving the document and refreshing the page. With 90 pixels padding, this is what we get. We've tried 70, 20, and 90. We've seen the differences. For the background color, this is what we chose, as you can see. Let's have a look at the page. So this is what we have for the background color. We can change it. Okay, let's go back to the code and just give it another color. Maybe something like that. We're going to save the document, jump back to the page and refresh. That's what we get for the background color. So let's go back and undo that. We save the document, jump back to the page, refresh the page, we'll return back to where we were. So let's go back to the code and continue. We have our margin set to auto. We can change our margin set to a different value. Take for instance, I'm going to try and change the margin to a different value. I can call it margin top. So I've changed the value of our margin to top. And I'm giving it 0%. From the top, I can give it like, say 10% from the top. So margin top, I'm calling it 10%, and I'm saving the document, heading back to the page, and refreshing this page. That's what we get. Margin top 10%. Let's jump back to the code and undo that. So we're now back to the margin auto. I'm saving this document, heading back to the page, refreshing, and we have margin auto. So it automatically assigned a margin for us. Now let's jump back to the code and make more changes. So remember, within the style is where we decide how we want the page to look like. For the H1, which is the heading 1, we want to give it a font family. So here we've given it font family called Arial, Helvetica, sans serif, and serif. We can change this font family to something else for the H1. So at the moment, I'm going to save the document, head back to the page, refresh, so we have this font family. Let's go back to the code and change our font family. Okay, I'm going to change our font family. I'm going to change our font family to, let's say Franklin. I'm going to change to Franklin Gothic Medium Area. So let's try that. So this is now our font family. We're going to save the document, jump back to the HTML page and refresh. So we can see it's made a little difference. The fonts are not exactly the same. So you can see what that gave us. So choosing the Franklin Gothic Medium, it gave us this font. Let's try another font family. Let's give H1 a different font family. We'll say font family. Let's give it Times New Roman. So it's Times New Roman. So we've changed the font family to Times New Roman. We save the document and we head back to the page and we refresh the page. Now it has changed to Times New Roman. Back to the code. So we've declared the text background color. We've declared the max width, the margin, the body background color, and the padding, which we gave 90 pixels. We've also declared the font family. We made few changes to see which one might benefit our design. We close the style and we also close the head. So coming down to the body, we open a div. So we assigned content to our class. So right here, content is saying that let's give 800 pixels to the maximum width. Let's make our margin to be auto. Let's give these color values to a background and let's give 50 pixels to the padding. So as it says in the note, it says the padding is the distance between text and the border. So I decided to leave some notes as much as I can for education to help us to know what is happening. So the notes allow us to know what is happening at every point, especially while we're learning. And it's also good for referencing. So it helps us to track down whatever we're trying to look for. Like this section is talking about this, that section is talking about that, that section is talking about this, and that section is talking about this. So it's automatically helps us to know what is happening there without even the need to read the code. So within the body section, we assign content to this class. So whatever content says is what happened to the H1. So for instance, the content says max width is 800 pixels, margin is auto, background is this color values, and padding is 90 pixels. So definitely H1 will appear that way. So let's have a look at H1 to see how it looks like. We're saving the document and we go to H1. So this is what happens as a result of everything we chose for H1 to look like. So for instance, we have declared font family Times New Roman for the H1. So furthermore, we have a paragraph, and our paragraph contains this text. And finally, we have another paragraph which contains the final text. So automatically, the paragraph inherits the normal text sizes if nothing is declared up here. For the paragraph, nothing was declared up here. Or we can say for the paragraph, let's give it a different font family for the paragraph. So I'm going to copy that and paste it below and change this to P. So for the font paragraph, I'm going to change the font size, I'm going to change the font type. I'm going to change the font family. I'm going to change the font family to Georgia or Cambria. So let's try that. Let's try the font size for the paragraph to Georgia times. Okay, let's save the document and head back to the web page. Remember, we have changed this paragraph font family to different font family. So let's refresh. You can see it's actually changed. But let's go back to the code. So now we've been able to create a center page document, which is HTML. We gave it a head, we gave it meta name, and the style where we performed all our experiments. We give it a body to display our experiments. Let's head to box shadow. In box shadow, we declare our document type, which is HTML. We had our HTML, our head, and style. Again, the style is where we perform all our experiments, and the body is where we display all the experiments we performed within the style. So with HTML head style, we open the style, we close the style here, and we close the head. So I'm just going to highlight it for you to see. So within the HTML, we have a head, and within the head, we have a style. So we open the head here, we inserted a style into the head, and we close the style here, and we close the head. So within the style, we carried out different experiments. Take, for instance, for a box shadow experiment, I have a few examples here to run through to show us different box shadows. For instance, I'm going to uncomment this one and save the document and head back to the HTML page. So here was the former box shadow, which is black. So for now, let's refresh the page. We can see the box shadow has changed to red. Let's go back to our code and uncomment this, and uncomment the next one. So let's save the file, go back to our page and refresh. We can see it has changed to this color. Let's go back to our code and uncomment the next one. So we'll save the document, we go back to our page and we refresh it. We have this type of box shadow. Let's head back to our code, undo that, uncomment this, save the document, head back to our page and refresh the page. Now we have a different type of box shadow. Let's head back to our code, undo that, and uncomment that, save the document, head back to our page, refresh the page, and we get a different box shadow. Let's jump back to our code, undo that, uncomment that, save our document, head back to our page, refresh the page. We have this type of box shadow. Let's jump back to the code, and finally let's uncomment this and save the document. Let's jump back to our page and refresh it. So finally we have this box shadow. Okay, let's jump back to the code and continue with our declarations. Furthermore, we declared for the body, we gave these color values to the background, while we gave 50 pixels for the padding. I'm going to make a few changes to the background color now. So the background was initially this, and I'm going to change it to something within this area. So we've changed the background color. I'm saving the document and heading back to the page. So I'm going to refresh the page, and this is what we get. So let's jump back to the code, undo that. Jumping back to the page, if we refresh it, we come back to where we were. Let's go back to the code and let's play around with the padding. So right now it's 50. Let's give it 20. We save the document, jump back to the page, refresh. We have 20 pixels padding. Let's zoom out to see how it looks. So that is 20 pixels padding. Let's jump back to the code and change this padding to 90. So at 90, we save the document, jump back to the page, refresh the page. We have 90 pixels space around the text. Now let's jump back to the code. Let's go back to 20, where we started from. So it's now 20, we save the document, we jump back to the page and refresh. It's now 20 pixels space around the text. That is the padding. Let's jump back to the code and look into further declarations. For the H1, we gave it this font family. As before, we can change the font family for the H1 text. And for the H2, we give it this color. Let's change the color for the H2 something red. Let's give it this color. Let's give the H2 that color. So we've changed the H2 color. I guess this is the H2. Okay, let's refresh the page. Now the H2 has been changed to that color. Let's jump back to the code and undo that. So we've undo the changes we've made, we save the document, we head back. So this is going to change as we refresh the page. So now it has changed. So let's make some changes to the H2 color. Let's change to something black. Let's make it a bit darker. So we save the document, we jump back to the page and refresh it. We have a darker color. Let's jump back to the code and see what else can we change. We have these values for the paragraph color. Let's change it to another color, say maybe blue. We're changing the paragraph color to blue. We save the document, jump to the page, and we refresh. This is a paragraph color and that is a paragraph. This is H1 and this is H2, and these are paragraphs. Let's head back to our code and see what the body looks like. So within the code, here is the body. We have H1, we have a paragraph, we have H2, we have another paragraph. So on the page, we have H1, we have a paragraph, we have H2, we have a paragraph, just as it is in the body. So let's go back to the code. So in our box shadow document, we have different values of box shadows that we played with. We had a box shadow color properties. We had a background color properties. We had a padding. We had a font family. For the H2, we had our color values. For the paragraph, we had our color values. And for the body, we had our texts. So at this point, we have implemented the box shadow. Let's head to the text shadow. So once again, we declared a document type, HTML, head, and style. Within the style, we had all our declarations, and within the body, we have our outputs. So over here, I've got a few things to run through to show how different text shadow looks like. Let's uncomment, save the document, jump back to the page and refresh. Now we have a different text shadow. Let's jump back to code, undo that, uncomment the next one, save the document, head back to the page and refresh the page. We have a different text shadow. The shadow is there, but it's not felt. As you can see, it's very faint compared to the topic. You can see the topic is very sharp. There's nothing like shadow around the text. But with this, if I'm to zoom in a little bit more, you can see the shadow begins to appear around the text. Okay, so let's zoom out. Let's head back to our code and make some more changes. So I'm going to undo that, uncomment that, save the document, jump back to the page and refresh the page. We're having a different text shadow. Let's jump back to the code, undo that, and uncomment that. Save the document, jump back to the page, refresh the page, and we have a different text shadow. Let's jump back to the code, undo that, and uncomment that as well. Save the document, jump back to the page, refresh the page. We have a different text shadow. Let's jump back to the code, undo that, uncomment that line, and save the document, jump back to the page, refresh the page. We have a different text shadow. Let's jump back to the code again, and finally we undo that. Let's uncomment the last one. Let's save the document, jump back to the page and refresh the page. We have this type of text shadow. Looking at the text appearance on the page, you can see it is ranged to the left. At this point, there is no padding here. So that's why it's touching the border. So it's better to center the text to make it more readable or to make it more appealing to the reader. Let's jump back to the code and see what we can do to make room here. So for the text shadow, I'm going to apply a padding to it. Okay, let's give it a padding of 40 pixels. We give 40 pixels to the padding. We save the document, we jump to the page and see how 40 pixels looks like. So this is 40 pixels distance from the border. Let's try 10 pixels. Jump back to the code and give it 10 pixels. We save the document, jump back to the page and refresh. So that's how 10 pixels looks like. Let's try 20 pixels. We save the document, jump back to the page and refresh. That's 20 pixels. Let's jump back to the code. So right within the style, we've declared everything we wanted or how we want the body to look like. So for the H1 up here, we give it these color values for the H1. For the paragraph, we give this color value. For the H3, we give this color value. And for the text shadow, we give it this text. For the text shadow, we can change this H3 to H1 as well. So let's change it to H1 and save the file. Let's jump back to the page and refresh it. We have a bigger text, just like the first one. Let's head back to the code. So right now, we have completed our text shadow using different options as we have commented out here. So let's jump to background image. Same thing in the background image. We're declaring our document type, HTML head style. Within the style, we display all our experiments within the body. For the paragraph, we have the font size, we had color, we have background image. For the body, we had background color, we have padding. We have another paragraph, we gave it these color values, and in our div, we had our background image. We had a selector here called .star. That's where we kept our background images. So we have one image here, 03. We have another image, 02. We set our background color to transparent. So let's see how the design looks like on the web page. So we're saving the document and we're jumping to background image. So here in background image, this is how it looks like. We have two types of images, this one and that one. And we have a GIF image as well, right on top of the two background. So the GIF image is the foreground, while these two are the images at the background. Okay, let's jump back to our code. We have 4 paragraphs on top of our background. Let's have a look. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs. 1 paragraph, 2nd paragraph, 3rd paragraph, and the 4th paragraph. So let's jump back to our code. At this point, we've designed a document for background image. So within our declaration, we had a background image, the background color to be transparent. We had another background image, and for the body, we had a background color of this value. And for the padding, we had 20 pixels. So we've now concluded our background image document. Let's jump to opacity. With opacity, background color are affected by the opacity level. So this document is all about a background and its opacity levels. So at this point, we have our opacity set to 0.8. So we can change 0.8 to 0.2 to see the difference it makes. So we've given it 0.2, saving the document, head back to the page, opacity. So initially, it was in this level of opacity, but we've now changed it to 0.2. Let's see how it looks like. 0.2 has faded almost everything away. So let's jump back to our code and make more changes. Let's give it 0.9. We've given it 0.9. We save our document, jump back and refresh. We have a more positive opacity level. So let's jump back to our code. What else can we do? Basically, within the style, we've declared everything we want to see in the body. So for this document, we're focusing more on opacity, how opacity level can affect a background of a text. For RGBA color, 4 values are required, such as red color, green color, blue color, and alpha transparency. The values for red, green, and blue must be decimal values from 0 to 255. The alpha value must be a number between 0, transparent, and 1, opaque. Attempt the following example below as part of your homework. HSLA color. The HSLA color function defines colors using the hue saturation lightness alpha model. HSLA color values are an extension of HSL color values with an alpha channel which specifies the opacity of the color. Hue is a value between 0 and 360. Saturation is measured in percentage, lightness is measured in percentage, and optional alpha is from 0 to 1. CSS gradients. CSS gradients is a smooth blending of shades from one color to another. CSS defines 3 types of gradients, such as linear gradients, radial gradients, and conic gradients. Chapter 6 Summary. In this 6th chapter, we examined more CSS basics. Continuing from chapter 4 of our main topic, Basics of Web Design, this chapter expanded your CSS skill sets. You were introduced to the box model. You configured CSS properties related to the box model, such as margin, border, padding, height, and width. You centered a web page using CSS. You explored a new CSS property including border radius, box shadow, text shadow, and opacity. In summary, chapter 6, we examined the followings. We examined width and height with CSS, the box model, configure margin with CSS, configure padding with CSS, the CSS border properties, valid border style values, configuring specific sides of a border, CSS rounded corners, centering page content with CSS, CSS text shadow properties, CSS background image, CSS properties, opacity properties, RGBA color, HSLA color, and CSS gradients. We have now come to the end of the 6th chapter of Basics of Web Design. Thank you all for your attendance.